Hello, everybody. My name is Sam Finley, and with the help of a little bit of coffee and Google Slides, I'm going to be showing you guys my extra credit assignment for Dr. Wang's class. So, um, the topic that I chose, the country that I chose, I kind of found because I was like looking up random little small countries, and this was on the list of kind of like small obscure countries that I found on Google. So the name of the country in question is Brunei, as you can see from this introductory slide. That's a really popular photograph. That's of the Sultan's Palace, which is one of the largest in the world, and I will show that to you guys later in another further obscure fact. So let's just dive right into the presentation, shall we? All right, so here are some initial facts about Brunei. As you can kind of see in that map right here, Brunei is kind of bordering some of these like kind of other Malaysian countries. It's one of the only Islamic Malay monarchies that remain in existence. China's right here, Japan, the Koreas, Vietnam. So as you can see, Brunei is a really small country, actually smaller than the state of Delaware, which borders the South China Sea, as you can see right here in the map. Its population, this is taken about in 2012, was roughly 395,000 with a 1.7% growth rate. Its capital and its largest city is Bandar Seri Begawan, which has a population of about 78,000 people. Its national holiday is called National Day, really creative there, which is on February 23rd. Brunei's export is about 5.53 billion US dollars, and most of this comes from their petroleum, their crude petroleum, and their acyclic alcohols and aircraft parts, which makes up probably about, I would say, 90% of their total economy. And from those industries, they pull. I mean, it's a ton of money for their population. So I'm going to go ahead and move on. So the language and culture of Brunei is majoritively Malay, although it is very popular to be teaching English and Chinese in primary, secondary schools because those are kind of the two major players in that region when it comes to economic activity. The religious population, it's about 67% of the population are uh, uh, they follow Islam, 13% Buddhist, 10% Christian, and the rest is indigenous beliefs or non-religious. Now, Brunei society is heavily influenced by the state's religion of Islam. As you can see, it follows Sharia law, and like I'll kind of hint on a little bit later, because of this and because of some particular legislation I'll mention later, there's been a lot of human rights activists that have come out criticizing the government, which began kind of in 2013, 2014, but has only kind of gotten worse. Now, the citizens of Brunei heavily favor soccer, like a lot of international countries, and their kind of big claim to fame is that they've sent at least a few athletes to compete in the Olympics, not really to much avail, but nevertheless. Now, we'll go ahead and get into kind of the business and the etiquette portion of the presentation. There's actually quite a few things, and I might actually recover some stuff. That's my mistake. It's just a matter of there's some very particular things about Brunei, and you just kind of have to get used to them. So to start off with, the social etiquettes. So alcohol is completely banned within the country, but eating pork for non-Muslims is permitted, which is kind of something surprising that I saw from the get-go. But I've been in one country that alcohol has been banned, which is Qatar, and it's really interesting because in America it's such a common status or social status to like go to the bars and things like that. So it's interesting. This is a country that practices like a strict prohibition on alcohol. Now, another social etiquette is that shaking hands across genders is really rare. Instead, you would probably put your right hand over your heart and do a small bow in the place of a handshaking. Unless, of course, if you're a U.S. businessman, you go over there. If the Bruneian businesswoman offers her hand first, then it's acceptable to take it, but only for like maybe 2 or 3 pumps, and that's it. Now, for non-Muslims, eating during the day of the month of Ramadan is distasteful. and sometimes it can earn you a fine or a rebuking from an officer. But it's generally socially better if you just don't eat in public during the month of Ramadan during the day. Um, it's also disrespectful and rude to stare into someone's eyes. So there's a lot of averting your eyes within like conversations. Do not give dog or toy dogs to children or anything out of pigskin, which is just seen as an insult. And when gifting items, offer them with the right hand, especially if it's a food item, always offer it with your right hand, or if it's a large item, you can offer with both hands. But always ensure that the item that you are gifting somebody is halal, which is not against the Islamic code, which would be an extreme offense if you were meeting with a Muslim person. So, all right, so here's some basic customs and protocols for when you are just interacting either in the business setting or if you're kind of like in a laid back setting. Greetings should be formal, relatively formal, and you should be always demonstrating respect and reference. There's going to be a giant theme in this presentation where when you are interacting with Bruneian individuals of higher age or status, you always show them or greet them with respect, as well as you're able to use their titles as well. So if like someone has like a title of like a teacher, you can always refer to them as teacher. So I'm going to kind of reiterate this later, but whenever you talk to someone, you always introduce the most important person on your team first. This is a really big part of Bruneian business society, which I'll hint on later. Most Bruneians themselves do not shake hands with members of the opposite sex. Of course, they're educated on Western culture and values, so sometimes if it's acceptable, they will initiate a handshake between opposite sex members, but it's relatively rare. Foreign businesswomen should just nod their head in greeting. Foreign businessmen should look for the Brunei woman to initiate a handshake. That's what I was talking about earlier. Now, the communication style in Brunei is indirect. This is something we kind of talked about in this international management class, where there's most of their conversations, most of their negotiations are very in an indirect style, where there's more emphasis placed on body language, body movement, than it is like direct words, verbal communication. So it's really important when you're speaking to someone of Bruneian descent that you're always kind of looking for those subtle signs within their body language to determine what they're actually thinking or meaning. So just something to consider. Now, the business culture of Brunei, like I was saying earlier, very important to show respect to those of higher age or position. Family and hierarchical relationships are way more prominent in Brunei than the West, and relative power structures exist in formal meetings. This is like such as, and I'll talk about this later, when you are walking into a room, like with your business colleagues, have the most important person go first, followed by like the second in command, third in command. That's what they do, and they will be expecting that of you because that's how you kind of like meet and sit down, is by like kind of like who's most important talks to who. So there's a thing called saving face, or there's a face culture in Brunei, which is, you'll see that all online. I've found it a lot of times, which basically means they don't want to show any kind of hostility, anger, surprise, upsetment, because they see that as embarrassing. So when you're talking to someone and if you think you said something that irritated them, they're going to try their best not to show it on their face, because they see that as kind of like a humble position. That's where they want to take. Bruneian titles also may be very long, and like I said earlier, addressing to someone by their title is acceptable. So the business etiquette, like when you're in negotiation, always advise your Bruneian colleague early as to who's going to be attending the meeting. The senior person will always enter the room first. Now, the first meeting in Bruneian business is always lighthearted. So don't expect to walk in there and expect like you're going to get some like good negotiating done that first meeting. It's always about just like a lighthearted, just to get to know you kind of conversation. And then, like I said earlier, watching body language, interpreting negative responses is really key. All right. let me see. Okay, so meeting protocol and negotiation techniques. Meetings begin with the rank order of importance, like I said. The senior host, who's going to be Bruneian, will begin by delivering a short welcoming story or introduction. And this can be followed by a short return speech. Normally, it's relatively acceptable that your most visiting senior member will kind of offer a gracious return speech, just saying like, thank you, your country's beautiful, building's beautiful, stuff like that. The first meeting is going to be laid back, and negotiations really should be positively framed, because of the whole idea that Bruneians they have this idea of saving face. You don't want to have to put them into a position where they feel like they have to say no, because they will do everything in their power to not say no. They'll probably reword the statement to say, well, we'll see, or maybe we'll have to think on that. This normally means that they're uncomfortable and that the conversation is kind of leading them to say no. So you can almost take that as a no, but it's important to try to be constructive in your negotiations and see if you can work from a better, more positive position. So the political and legal environment for Brunei. So it's an Islamic Malay monarchy, one of the last in the world. It operates under Sharia law, which is like a religious-based legal system, which has caused a lot of human rights activist groups to criticize the Bruneian government, because as recent as 2014, there's been legislation that was introduced that allowed or permitted the use of stoning for people that were found to be gay or adulterers, which is a really just a ancient barbaric technique that has been used in not just Islamic law, but also like Jewish law as well. But it's like this was implemented as early, as far ago as 2014, 2015. The Sultan himself of the country, he comes from a family line of a hereditary family line that can be traced back to the early 1400s, and he's a very, very wealthy man. It's a very socialist state. The government owns the majority of the business in Brunei, which most of it is like a cash cow of fossil fuels. So crude oil production, what else? Natural gas. It can make a country really wealthy. The economic and social and technological situation. So Brunei is actually a major commercial center in the South Pacific. It hosts a active banking sector as well as a fossil fuel and manufacturing sectors. Most of the schools and most of the businesses are state-owned. But despite this, Brunei has a pretty decent set of amenities, probably just not the amount that you'd expect in Western culture. Like you're not going to find bars and things like that over there. But for the most part, they're trying to present themselves as an up-and-coming commercial center. So the main industries, their whole goal is to pretty much diversify away from fossil fuel sectors. So they're trying to open up more like commercial centers to try to invite international investment, because the country has a significant income based on fossil fuels, and the way that the world is working, there's more of a social push for renewable resources. So in a lot of these countries, they operate the same way. Not just them; it's like Dubai, Qatar. I put some of the notable businesses that are owned by Brunei are Brunei LNG, Royal Brunei Airlines, and Huaho Department Stores and Telecom Brunei. Some other interesting and obscure facts: the Bruneian Sultan, which I put part of his full name right there. He has almost a paragraph worth of titles. Once owned one of the largest private car collections, with over 2,500 in total, most of them are luxury cars. He has received an honorary doctorate from both Moscow State University and the University of Oxford, England. Brunei also has the largest residential palaces in the world, with 1,788 rooms, a mosque, garage space for over 100 cars, and 5 swimming pools. So that's just a little bit about it. I've seen some YouTube videos on the country, and it looks very pretty. A lot of just tons of just gorgeous mosques. So it would be a really interesting tourist location, and I think that's something that they're trying to aim for to increase their tourist sector as well. But yeah, had a really fun time. It was like kind of like an obscure country at first when I was looking up and seeing, what was it all about. And I'm glad I did, because I've learned something about a country that I really hadn't heard much about any prior. Here are my works cited pages, and here's some of the picture cited pages that I've used throughout the PowerPoint. Thank you guys so much. I guess the question that I have, if you've finished watching this video, is would you ever consider having to work or go on a business trip in Brunei? What would be one thing that you're excited for if you were to go? All right, thank you guys so much. I will close out the video, and I'm looking forward to seeing other people's suggestions and videos too. See ya.